pleasant morning to all of you. A warm welcome to our Zoom webinar organized by GMOA and Society for Health Research and Innovation. Today's topic is rarely covered in a lecture series, yet a very important discipline of medicine. And the topic is how to avoid transfusion reactions and good transfusion practice. Kindly mute your microphone and turn off the camera during the presentation and use the chat box to clear your doubts at the end of this session. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pavitra Arewata, Consultant Transfusion Physician, National Blood Transfusion Service. She is also the Secretary of Sri Lankan Chapter of South Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine. Thank you for joining us, Madam, today, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, my dear doctors. Some of you may be my students and some of you may be my colleagues. Good morning to everybody. I'm going to cover the whole aspect of preventing transfusion reactions, as well as I like to give you all an overall picture of how transfusion service works in Sri Lanka and the achievements that we have got, as well as enlightening you regarding prevention of transfusion practices. First of all, I would like to share with you the learning outcomes after this lecture that you all have to achieve. You will have to understand the concept of blood and blood components and indications of blood and blood components, as well as you have to have a better understanding of the tests that we perform and the samples that you send to the blood bank, why these samples should be sent, and why we need to be so strict about the sample sending procedure, and to have a better understanding of transfusion reactions, how to manage them and how to prevent them. The National Blood Transfusion Service of Sri Lanka is a nationally coordinated service under the Ministry of Health. I'm proud to say in South Asia, Sri Lanka is the only transfusion service which has a nationally coordinated system. We have 106 blood banks all over the country. Those blood banks are managed by the National Blood Center, and we have under the National Blood Center 24 cluster centers which are managed by consultant transfusion physician. All the blood banks in the country are covered by a consultant transfusion physician. So a few blood banks, sometimes 10 blood banks, sometimes 4 blood banks are attached to each cluster depending on the workload of the relevant blood bank. The services provided by the transfusion services, you all know very much better since you all have been working in the wards. We do a lot of serological procedures in providing blood to patients, such as cross-match, Coombs test, and all those things. You all know those. And we perform therapeutic procedures like plasma exchange and preparation of platelet-rich plasma, sometimes stem cell therapy for orthopedic surgeries, and we do involve in stem cell transplantation procedures in the National Cancer Institute of Maharagama, and we do a lot of immunohematology reference laboratory testing at our center in Narahempita, and also we have a HLA testing laboratory. We involve in kidney transplantation in Sri Lanka. Before the transplantation, we do HLA typing of the patient and the donor, and blood grouping of the patient and the donor, and just before transplant, we do the cross match, that is the HLA cross match between the kidney donor and the patient. And if the patient requires any desensitization, like when the patient has developed donor-specific antibodies, we have to desensitize by performing several rounds of plasma exchanges for the patient. So we prepare the patient for kidney transplantation. After the transplantation, there may be acute rejection and chronic rejection. In order to prevent those rejections, we perform plasma exchange procedures for kidney transplantation. Then after the transplant, we do several rounds of antibody testing to see whether patient is developing HLA antibodies. Likewise, we are providing a great service to the entire country. So when the blood and blood components are concerned, we provide several types of red cell products. As you all can see, several types of platelet products, several types of plasma products like FFP and cryo. And depending on the patient's requirement, we prepare those components. We assess the patient's requirement and we provide those components from the National Blood Transfusion Service to the entire government sector and majority of private sector blood banks. So in Sri Lanka, of course, we prepare a lot of blood components. As you all can see, the factors where asterisks are marked, like factor 7A, factor 8, factor 9, albumin-like products which are from fractionated products from plasma. Still, we are not doing in Sri Lanka, but we are planning to do in future. All the other products like red cells, granulocytes, FFP, all these things we produce in our laboratories in the National Blood Center, as well as in our laboratories all over the country. Let's move on to the topic that we are going to discuss today. First of all, I just want to tell you that transfusion is a life-saving procedure, as well as it is a life-threatening process. That is why we have to aim in preventing transfusion reactions. So there are a lot of risks in transfusions, not like giving medications to patients, and as well as a lot of advantages of giving transfusions to several types of patients. So when the advantages are concerned, so transfusion is benefited by this replacement of the replacement of fluid compartment of our body, as well as a therapeutic method of giving products to the patient. So it will restore the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood in our circulation. It will replace clotting factors and it will correct anemia, as well as it will restore the intravascular volume. But keeping that in mind, we have to consider there are a lot of risks involved in transfusion. Of course, I must say blood transfusion is a supportive therapy, and appropriate use of blood and blood components is of paramount importance, because the transfusion of safe blood products to treat a condition leading to significant morbidity and mortality that cannot be prevented or managed by any other effective method is the indication for transfusion, not to manage the volume deficit in the patient. So if we determine to use blood and blood products appropriately, we can minimize the risk. We'll see what are the risks of giving a blood transfusion. The first risk is risk of transfusion transmissible infections. That is called TTI. So what are those infections? Especially almost all the infections that are transmissible are acquired by individuals when they have bad sexual behaviors. So those infections are the infections that are recommended by the WHO to be done before a transfusion are HIV 1 and 2, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and for syphilis. So we in Sri Lanka do all 4 tests, and other than that we perform malaria testing as well. But in some other countries, in some other blood banks in Southeast Asia, they do not have ability to perform those tests because of the limitations, monetary limitations they have to be given to the health infrastructure of the country. So the first risk is transmission of transfusion transmitted infections. So we have adapted all the steps to minimize those infection risks to the patients or the recipients. The second risk is alloimmunization. Alloimmunization means when you all introduce white cells or red cells to the patient will develop antibodies against those red cells and white cells when the relevant patient do not possess the relevant antigen. So this alloimmunization is a great risk when patients are receiving transfusions. The third risk is transfusion reactions. There are several types of transfusion reactions I will elaborate on. It may be hemolytic transfusion reactions. Sometimes it may be the acute lung injury after transfusion that is called TRALI. And the most common reaction is febrile transfusion reactions. And some patients, when they receive long-term transfusion support, they develop immunological refractoriness to some products, especially platelet products. We have encountered in several patients, especially patients who are getting long-term transfusion support, like patients with aplastic anemia and MDS. Like patients, they have developed immunological refractoriness. When we give platelets, we don't get the expected increment of platelet count because of the antibodies produced in that patient go and react with the transfused platelets. So immunomodulation is another risk. When we transfuse products, you all know, however much the world has developed in technology, no laboratory can develop blood. Blood is a gift from genuine blood donors. So because of this fact, because of the fact that it is a biological product, it has the risk of immunomodulation in the recipient. Sometimes some patients do get a fear to get blood transfusion. And the next risk, it is not a risk, but there is a very high cost that the government has to bear to maintain a transfusion service, to give a unit of blood to the patient. I will share with you all the cost in UK, because in Sri Lanka we don't really charge for blood from the patients. This is the cost in UK that they charge from the patients. You all can see how much cost for a blood product to be transfused to a patient. For red cells, it is 24,000 rupees. And for 6 units of platelets, that is the adult dose of platelets, it is 38,000 Sri Lankan rupees. And for FFP, it is 5,600 rupees. And for the cryoprecipitate, it is around 6,000 rupees that the patient pay for these blood products in UK. So we'll move on to the topic, the transfusion reactions and how to prevent them. So when the transfusion reactions are concerned, there are several types of reactions, like allergic reactions, as you all can see, and febrile reactions, then hemolytic transfusion reactions. When allergic reactions are concerned, on the left hand corner of your slide, the allergic reaction can be mild and can be severe. When a patient who is given a transfusion develop facial flushing, hives, rash, it is called a mild reaction. When you see a patient who is getting a transfusion develops anxiety, wheezing, like shortness of breath, and low blood pressure, it is called a severe allergic reaction. Sometimes donors get scratching as well. When it comes to febrile reactions, usually the transfused patient gets fever, chill, sometimes anxiety, sometimes they can get headache, tachycardia, and tachypnea. So those are called febrile transfusion reactions. The most dangerous type of reactions are called hemolytic transfusion reactions, where you all have given incompatible blood to a patient, that is ABO, incompatible blood to a patient. The patient may be blood group O, and you all have given by mistake a B positive blood to a patient. So whatever the transfusion reaction, the first step you have to do is to stop the blood transfusion, whatever the reaction that patient gets, and thereafter only we have to investigate and we have to manage the patient. The first step is stopping this transfusion. So we'll discuss more about this hemolytic transfusion reaction, because as medical officers, it is our prime duty to prevent this hemolytic transfusion reaction, because it is always a man-made disaster, right? Because somebody there in the transfusion chain has done a mistake, and therefore the patient is getting reaction. It may be the blood bank staff, it may be the doctor who is performing the cross match, it may be the nurse who is issuing the blood, or it may be in the ward setup, it may be the wrongdoing done by the nurse who draw the sample or the doctor who draws sample, and it may be there is something which we should not expect to occur has done during the administration of blood product. So it may be the misidentification of the patient. So what are the symptoms those patients get if you all by mistake, if you all have given an incompatible transfusion to the patient? The patient will get chills, fever, tachycardia. Sometimes the patient may not get these features. Sometimes the patient may complain, doctor, there is a pain along the site of the transfusion where the needle is. That is the very first thing the patient may tell you. So some patients may tell that, doctor, I get chest pain, I get low back pain, like apprehension like feeling. And when you, at the moment, if a patient says that, doctor, I get pain along the transfusion vein or along the arm, and the patient is shivering and complaining of chest pain, the very first thing you have to look at, if the patient is catheterized, look at the urine bag. if a patient gets hemolytic transfusion reaction, that is, if there is a major ABO incompatibility, there is red cell breakdown in the circulation, and it is visible by the urine that patient passed about 1 hour or within sometimes within 20 minutes of the reaction, the patient will have hemoglobinuria. It is not hematuria, it is hemoglobinuria. So then you have to have the knowledge how to differentiate this hemoglobinuria and hematuria. I will let you know in next few slides how do you do this. I just want to give you a brief introduction. When patient present with you with some symptoms, how do you differentiate this transfusion reaction according to the symptom that patient tells? Sometimes patient may only has fever and complain that I have chills or something. So the first thing, the most common reaction that you all get is febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction, which is called FNHTR. But it is also a feature of acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. So you should not neglect that complaint. Then the third thing is TRALI. This is very common in all clinical setups, but neglected because most of the doctors, they don't know about this TRALI. TRALI is transfusion related acute lung injury. And if there is microbial contamination in the transfused pack, also you can get fever, but in this instance you will get very high fever. It is more than 2 centigrades above from the baseline level. So sometimes the patient may complain of itching, rash, urticaria, or facial edema, which convey the message to you that this is going to be an allergic reaction. So in a patient who is being transfused, if the patient says that I can't breathe, or the patient has shortness of breath, what you have to do is measure the oxygen saturation of the patient. If oxygen saturation is dropping, the shortness of breath is continue to get adverse, what you have to think is TRALI, or TRALI means transfusion related acute lung injury, or TACO. TACO means transfusion associated circulatory overload. TACO is very common with patients with cardio respiratory compromise. So we have to differentiate between these two. The one thing that you can do is you have to do a chest X-ray and see whether there are perihilar shadows. If there are perihilar shadows and there is blood pressure is low, and you can, if facilities available, you can do BNP levels. If BNP levels are rising, it is the diagnosis more towards TACO. But if patient has perihilar shadows, it is the diagnosis is more towards TRALI. If a patient complains of respiratory distress, dyspnea, and fever, all these things together with low oxygen saturation, sometimes it may be acute hemolytic reaction, sometimes it may be TRALI, TACO, or maybe microbial contamination. The one other thing I forgot to tell you, if when you suspect TRALI or TACO in a patient, in order to differentiate the two, you can measure the blood pressure. If the patient has hypertension or high blood pressure, it is more towards TACO. If patient is hypotensive or the patient has low blood pressure, it is more towards TRALI, right? So if any patient develops hypertension, there are 4 different differential diagnoses that you have to consider. Those are mentioned here. Again, acute hemolytic reaction and TRALI comes into picture, which are more common in our setup. So you all know, as I told you, pain at the IV infusion site, diagnosis is more towards acute hemolytic reaction, which is due to ABO incompatible transfusion, right? So all the transfusion reactions I have already mentioned are summarized in this slide for your convenience. Those reactions can be divided into two, immune mediated and non-immune mediated. Both can be divided again into four categories: immediate immune mediated and delayed immune mediated, immediate non-immune reactions, and delayed non-immune reactions. So all these are mentioned here for your convenience in order to arrive at a diagnosis of the patient. So I'm not going to read all these things in this slide, but I just want to give some idea about bacterial contamination of the blood bag. We keep the blood red cell bag in 2 to 6 degrees temperature in our blood bank refrigerators. And in this temperature, there are bacteria which can multiply in the blood bag. They are called cycrophilic bacteria. They can multiply, especially E. coli. They can multiply and produce toxins. So if there is toxin production inside the blood bag, there will be frothy appearance in the blood bag. Therefore, you have to inspect the blood bag before transfusion each and every time. So if you give this toxin high blood to a patient, the patient can die then and there. So as a transfusion service, we have taken all the steps to prevent bacterial contamination of blood bags, but it can happen. There can be mistakes by all categories of staffs. It can happen. So therefore, please make sure that you all look into the blood bag and see whether there are clots in the blood bag, there is frothing in the blood bag, there is discoloration in the blood bag before you transfuse to the patient. So when transfusion reactions occur, especially I'm talking about the ABO incompatible transfusions. It can be intravascular as well as extravascular. Intravascular transfusion reactions usually occur by IgM antibodies. Those are pentamers. They go and attack the red cells, and red cell lysis will occur inside the vasculature. So that is called intravascular. This when the antibodies are IgG type, they attack to the red cell surface, on antigens on the red cell surface, but IgG antibodies are not able to lyse the red cell inside the circulation. What they do is, when red cells are going through the reticuloendothelial system like spleen and liver, these antibody bound red cells undergo destruction. So this is called extravascular hemolysis. This is usually occur if you transfuse a unit of blood to a patient who has anti-D or antibodies to any other system in the red cell surface. When the red cells are concerned, the major system is ABO system. Other than that, there are several other antigen systems on the red cell surface called KEL, Duffy, and KID. If there are antibodies in the patient's circulation against this RH system or KEL, Duffy, KID system, those antibodies are IgG type. They are not mainly IgM. So what happens is, when you transfuse incompatible blood, that means the blood that containing the relevant antigen, the antibody binding will occur in the circulation, but cell destruction will occur in the reticular endothelial system, and therefore the patient will get jaundice and discoloration of urine and low hemoglobin levels about 3 to 4 days after transfusion. Sometimes it may be 24 hours after transfusion. Those are not immediate transfusion reactions. But what happens in intravascular hemolysis is pentamers, that is anti-A in our circulation and anti-B in our circulation. Those are antibodies which are called pentamers. They have a lot of antigen binding sites, 5 times more than the IgG antibodies. So what happens is when you transfuse incompatible blood, say the patient is blood group O patient has anti-A and anti-B IgM type in their circulation. Lot of IgM, anti-A and anti-B in their circulation. So by mistake, when you transfuse A positive blood to a O patient, what happens is the antibodies, anti-A in the patient's circulation will come and bind A antigen on the red cell surface of the patient. So what will lead to that? So this will lead to macrophage activation, and it will activate all the complement cascade and lead into several reactions inside our body. This is what happens when this reaction occurs. So you can see IgM antibody has bound to several red cells, 5 red cells, and it will lead to red cell lysis in the circulation. What happens, it activates 2 pathways. One is it activates the complement cascade, right? So this activation of complement cascade results in release of cytokines, chemokines, tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 1, interleukin 6 and interleukin 8 to the circulation. So this will lead to increased capillary permeability, vasodilation, hypotension, fever, and ultimately lead into DIC in the patient. The other pathway is these antigen antibody complexes, they go and bind in the glomerular basement membrane. So it will lead to acute tubular necrosis. So when the patient develop this, a patient will run into renal failure. You all can see hemoglobinuria in the patient and hemoglobinemia in the patient and renal vasoconstriction. So it will lead to acute renal failure. So when a transfusion reaction like this occurs, you have to immediately take action to prevent this renal failure and this DIC. You have to be competent enough to manage this DIC as well as renal failure. I will brief you how you should do this. So I told you in an earlier slide that you should be able to differentiate between the hemoglobinuria and hematuria, because hemoglobinuria is the one a patient who is getting a transfusion reaction can develop. That is the earliest sign that you can detect. So in an uncentrifuged urine sample, it always looks red colored urine. But when you centrifuge the urine sample, if there is hematuria, the red cells will go down to the bottom of the tube. But in hemoglobinuria, such thing that does not occur. Always the urine is red colored. So how you all should manage those patients in your ward setup? It is the paramount importance, because you all are the patient, you all are the medical officers who are managing the patient right at the bedside. So what you have to do is, even if patient is complaining of fever or even a single some uncomfortable feeling, that if the patient is given a transfusion at the time, the first thing that you have to do is stop the transfusion. Maintain a good IV line, and you have to manage the acute problems promptly. After that, if you want to give hydrocortisone, you can give. But don't give hydrocortisone before transfusion to any patient. After stopping the transfusion, you have to do a quick clerical check of the blood pack, because at the same time, if another patient is also getting a transfusion in the same ward, there must be a mix of these two blood packs. So the two patients will be maybe getting affected at the same time. So therefore clerical check is the most important thing. Make sure that this patient is getting the correct transfusion, and make sure that any other patient is not getting a transfusion in the same ward at the same time until you sort this problem out. Right? So the second thing is to, after maintaining an IV line, you have to give some fluid to this patient, because if it is a ABO incompatible transfusion, we have to maintain a good renal perfusion in order to prevent the patient going into acute renal failure. So hydrate the patient, maintain the IV line, and inform the blood bank. The blood bank do another clerical checkup and get a sample from the patient and send to the blood bank with the relevant reaction form filled. And you have to draw a new sample from the patient and the relevant pack with the form, and get the advice for the transfusion, whether to continue or discard the pack or everything after the transfusion reaction workup. So this is the summary that we do, the things that we do in our blood banks when we ask you all to stop the transfusion. So what we do is we do a just Coombs test, that is direct agglutination test in the blood bank, to see whether there is any antigen antibody interaction has occurred. So if the direct agglutination test or direct Coombs test is positive and there is visible hemolysis in the post-transfusion sample that you have sent to us, what we do is we just centrifuge that blood sample and see whether there is visible hemolysis. If there is visible hemolysis, we immediately advise you all to manage the patient as having an acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. So thereby you will be able to save the life of the patient, right? So if this happens 24 hours after the transfusion, it is called a delayed transfusion reaction. So what we ask you all, if it is if we see visible hemolysis, we ask you all to maintain BP and maintain a good renal perfusion with IV fluids and diuretics. So when the direct antiglobulin test that we perform is negative, we do this immediately. If there is no visible hemolysis in the sample, post-transfusion sample that you all send to us, so hemolytic reaction is excluded. But we have other pathways to investigate, whether whether patient has fever, allergic reactions, or TRALI, or transfusion associated graft versus host disease, which is a lethal condition. It cannot be treated. Always patient die if a patient gets transfusion associated graft versus host disease. So these are the lines of investigations that we do in our blood banks. I'm not going to elaborate on it. If somebody wants, really wants this information, so I can teach you all. As I mentioned earlier, reporting of this transfusion reaction is of paramount importance because we have in our National Blood Transfusion Service a system called hemovigilance. It is a strategy to enhance safe transfusions. And it is a voluntary reporting system. We don't force you all to report, but we want you all to report. It is a no blame culture, non punitive culture. We are not going to find fault with you. We just collect data to improve our services. But yearly, we build annual report and annual hemovigilance report and give recommendations to improve transfusion practices. That is the only thing that we do. We are not going to find fault with the nurse or the doctor or blood bank nurse or blood bank doctor. No, we are not going to find fault with anybody. But what we do is we do whatever the steps that we can take to prevent further occurrence of such incidences. So therefore, please kindly send transfusion reaction form duly filled to the blood bank with the relevant samples when you all get a transfusion reactions. So this is the picture of the transfusion reaction forms. There are very few things that you have to write. You have to just mark in a cage. Although this looks very complicated, only you have to write the patient's name and age. Only tick where the the symptoms that patient get. You don't have to write a lot of things. Just put a tick and give your signature and send it to the blood bank with the relevant samples. So in order to prevent such ABO incompatible transfusions, what you all have to make sure is very few simple things. Blood transfusion should be from the same blood type, that is the same blood group of the patient, and we do group switching when there is acute shortage of blood, and that when that is recommended by the consultant transfusion physician only. Always we try to give the ideal blood group to the relevant patients. So when there is an emergency where you don't know the patient's blood groups, there is no time to do the patient blood group or the cross match. We can give O negative blood to patients who are bleeding to death until the correct blood group is done and compatibility can be done, right? So you should not delay a transfusion simply because you don't know the blood group of the patient, because it is a life-threatening procedure. So because of this risk of poor bedside transfusion practices only, it will lead to ABO incompatible transfusion. Which will lead to significant morbidity and mortality. So as medical officers, it is our duty to prevent such undesirable effects. So in summary, the safe transfusion practices depend on, that means avoiding transfusion reactions leading to morbidity and mortality. Will depend on accurate, unique identification of the patient at the time of labeling the sample, collecting the sample, and when during the final check of the patient, when you all are ready to administer the cross-match blood unit to the patient. It should be done at the patient's bedside, both by the doctor and the nurse. So we'll see how we can ensure a patient is getting the right product at the right time. What are the things that you can do as medical officers to prevent these lethal reactions? You all have seen in the ward setup, we ask several documents to be sent with the blood sample to the blood bank. But when you consider, when you all are sending a sample to the hematology lab, you all don't see that they are requesting a BHT of the patient. They are strictly adhering to the identification details of the patients. So they just receive the sample after checking details. But when a sample is received to the blood bank, when a sample is sent to the blood bank, we are so specific that patient's blood sample should have the correct name, correct BHT number, correct date, and we need the signature of the person, whether it is a doctor or nurse who draws the sample. That is because we want to prevent all ABO incompatible transfusion reactions. So therefore, please make sure that you all write the names legibly, ideally 2 names in the blood request form. So all the patient identification details should be clearly written in the blood request form. And we want the diagnosis of the patient, indication for the transfusion, because we want to give the ideal product for the patient. Some patients require irradiated blood. Some patients require wash red cells. Some patients require uh, plasma reduced products, depending on their diagnosis and depending on their previous transfusion reactions. Therefore, we need the clinical information of the patient in order to decide what product to be given to the relevant patient. So this is how the blood request form looks like. Please make sure that all these spaces are filled in legible letters, because we want to cross check them. And the mandatory field is the blood group of the patient. Most of our patients know their blood group. It has been done in somewhere else. If it is done in another hospital, you have to write the blood group here. Sometimes all the patients carry their previous diagnosis cards. They have their blood group written. Please write this blood group in this cage, because you can prevent lethal transfusion reactions simply by writing this blood group. When we receive a sample, if the blood group that we get do not tally with the previous group, what we do is we get down another sample and we cross check whether what is the correct blood group. So thereby we can prevent lethal transfusion reactions. Therefore, please make sure to write the previous blood group of the patient. Even if the patient says that, if there is no documentation, even if patient says my blood group is O positive, please write O positive and says write patient says. If the patient has a diagnosis card from NHSL, write O positive and just put NHSL. Then we know that this has been done at NHSL. Please do that. This will prevent lot of transfusion related deaths. So this is what I have already informed you. As I told you, weight is very important in children, because we cross-match blood according to the required weight requirement of the blood, depending on the weight of the child. So it is your duty to fill this all the cages in a legible manner. No point filling this form with illegible letters. In urgent setup, you can request blood urgently, but we cut short the cross-match procedure when we get an urgent request. Simply because you all forget to send the sample on time, please don't put urgent, because it is unfair by the patient, because we cut short. Actually, it is unfair by the patient because we cut short the procedure. There is a risk for a transfusion reaction when we do urgent procedures. Therefore, please try to get the full cross-match procedure as much as possible. So as I told you, all the patient information, that is age, name, BHT, and the date, all these things should match whatever it is in the sample. I told you that you can request blood as a routine, as a urgent, and as an emergency procedure. When you request blood for an emergency, blood will be provided within 15 minutes if it is ABO RH compatible blood only. But even if you can't wait that 15 minutes, you can request uncross-matched blood, right? So when you all say urgent, we will provide blood within 45 minutes, and for all the routine testing that you request, we do full compatibility testing for all the samples that we receive. So this is how a legibly written request form looks like. But you can see the house officer has written only one name of the patient. This should not be done. There should be two names, because when a single ward is considered, there can be two Pereiras or three Pereiras in the same ward. So we want to differentiate. So write two names. It is Nimal Pereira or Kamala Pereira or whatever the first name and the last name. This blood group unknown should be written only when the patient can't tell his or her blood group only. Most of the people who have a driving license, they know their blood group. It is there in the driving license. So the importance is when there is a discrepancy in the sample that we get, and this we can cross check. Especially all the mothers who are admitted to gyn and obs wards. All the females, they get their blood group done during their pregnancy. So all of them know their blood group. So when we receive a sample to the blood bank, we check all these things. You all can see we check with the first page of the BHT, we check with the request form, we check a few parameters, that is name, age, sex, and all these things. And from the blood bank, we provide a sticker for the labeling of the blood that is drawn for cross match. This sticker is provided as a result of annual hemovigilance report. Since the nurse who draws the sample should handwrite the label then and there at the patient's bedside, this should not be done at the nurse's station. This is to avoid mix-up of samples from two patients. So therefore, when you draw samples, you have to do the positive patient identification of the patient. So this has to be done during the sampling, as well as labeling the product, as well as before the administration. So how this positive patient identification can be done, and who is responsible, and what records are required. Positive patient identification should be done in order to ensure the right sample is taken from the right patient. But also you have to make sure it is the right patient and right volume of the sample. So how this positive patient identification can be achieved? You have to go to the bedside of the patient and you have to ask their full name. Right? Say the name of the patient is Kamala Pereira. You should not go to the bedside and ask, are you Kamala Pereira? ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මම දැකලා තියෙනවා වාට්ටුව. they call Kamala Pereira innawada kiyala. Then if there are two Kamala Pereiras, somebody else can come. Therefore, you have to go to the patient bedside, check the BHT number, check the numbers are correct, check the age is correct, and after that you have to ask the patient to tell her name or his name, right? So therefore අහන්න ඔයාගේ නම මොකක්ද? ඔයාගේ වයස කීයද? And check whether all these details are correct with the request form and the BHT. So you can do that in a conscious patient. When a patient is unconscious on the theater table, you all want to give transfusion because the patient is bleeding. There is a massive bleeding going on. So how can you cross-check the patient's identity? That is the wristband. You have to check all the details in the wristband before sending a sample for another cross-match. So accurate labeling of the sample is important. That is why we have provided you all with the stickers from the National Blood Transfusion Service. So patient's name, age, sex, BHD number, all the things have to be there, and the person who draws the sample, whether it is a nurse or the doctor, should sign in the request form. Make sure, in order to avoid all incompatible transfusions, bleed only one patient at a time. Do not use pre-labeled tubes. Label the tube then and there at the patient's bedside and handwrite the sample. In UK and in all the developed countries, when the patient gets admitted to the hospital, they print all the sample labels for all the other investigations, but not for cross-match. In all the developed countries also, they have to handwrite the sample label when it is sent for transfusion laboratory. This is in order to avoid ABO incompatible transfusions. So in some hospitals in Sri Lanka also, these labels are printed, but they cannot be sent to the blood bank. The blood bank, that is why we have provided you all with a sticker. If there is any doubt regarding the sample, please discard that sample and take a new sample because it is a life-saving procedure. If you all discard the sample and take a new sample, you will save the life of the patient. Sometimes when we receive samples, we reject in the blood bank. It is not because we are angry with you all, because we want to safeguard the lives of all the patients in our country, all the patients in our hospitals. So therefore, we will reject samples without labels, incomplete or wrongly labeled samples, and we have some concerns regarding the sample integrity, whether it is hemolyzed or inadequate sample. A cross-match procedure requires about 20 drops of patient's serum, not blood. So when we separate serum, we have to have a lot of drops of blood in order to perform a cross-match procedure. In an emergency, you may think that in an emergency, when a patient with a RTA come to the ETU or PCU with bleeding to that with a life-threatening bleeding, you all can request uncross-match blood, right? You all can request that over the phone. When a porter or when a junior staff comes to collect the blood, you all can send the request form. Even if you don't have time to write the request form, you can send the request form later. But please make sure that you all give correct information over the phone, right? If time permits, you can send the request form, the properly filled request form, and the sample from the patient through the junior staff if time permits. So there is a space in the request form where you can request uncross-matched blood. I must mention that the authorizing consultant's name can be written there, but his signature is not mandatory. If somebody who is senior in the ward allows uncross-matched blood, if the consultant transfusions is physician is okay with that, we can issue uncross-matched blood over the phone for a over the phone request, right? But we have to have correct details through over the phone request. There are several steps in providing uncross-matched blood. For the first 1 or 2 units, we can provide uncross-matched O negative blood until the blood group is done. So you all send the sample through the porter or the through minor staff. Then we can do the blood group of the patient. Then we can give blood of the relevant group to the patient. So sometimes if it is a life-threatening bleeding, we may not have time to do the cross-match procedure. Even with that, we can give group-specific blood. That doesn't harm the patient, giving group-specific blood, because patient is going to bleed to death. So we somehow or other, we want to prevent the death. So in order to prevent the death, you have to provide blood somehow or other. So that is not a risk. You have to always see what are the risks and benefits. You have to outweigh the risk and benefits. When a patient is going to bleed to death, you should not look for the risk involved in transfusions. Then and there you have to transfuse the patient. So after that, when time permits, we will in the blood bank, we will do the cross match. We do a retrospective cross match in the blood bank. If there is any incompatibility, we can give you the treatment options for that. Now we have saved the life of the patient, so there are treatment options for that as well. So after that, we can provide cross match blood. So requesting blood over the phone for such an emergency. The details that should be provided are mentioned here. If there are any patient identification details. Sometimes you don't have any detail for patient identification. Just what you can say is this a male or male, a middle-aged or young, or a baby, or something like that, or the color of the dress that the patient is wearing. So something that we need to make sure that this patient is given this blood, right? And please inform the relevant blood bank staff what are the components that you all need, whether it is red cells, platelets, plasma, whatever the things. Just inform over the phone. We will be issuing. We will put aside all the routine work, and we will issue blood for that patient who is bleeding to death, right? So you all know when to request blood when there is acute blood stock. When there is symptomatic anemia, make sure that the oxygen dissociation curve shifts only when the hemoglobin level is less than 7. If the patient's hemoglobin level is more than 7, if patient is not actively bleeding, you don't have to worry so much. We can do all the pre-transfusion workup and give the most appropriate blood to those patients. And we can improve the hemoglobin levels of the patient by other means, not exposing the patient to a transfusion risk. And always assess the patient with the hemoglobin level as well as the clinical status of the patients. Most of the patients who have cardiorespiratory compromise, they need a higher hemoglobin level. The other topic that I wanted to discuss with you is how you should calculate the volume of blood to be given to the patients. Always, it is in pediatric practice, what we do is hemoglobin deficit into body weight into 3 is the blood volume that is required. Say the hemoglobin level required is 12. Now the patient's hemoglobin level is 8. The deficit is 4. 4 into body weight of the patient, say body weight is 20 kilograms. Then it has to be amplified by 3, and the relevant, according to this example, the relevant patient requires 240 cc. In adults, by transfusing 1 unit of blood, you can get a 1 gram per deciliter increment of the hemoglobin level. In a non-bleeding patient, we usually advise to give 15 ml per kg per body weight for a single day. So the most important thing in transfusion practice, bedside transfusion practice, is the clerical check and the physical check before the transfusion of a blood pack to the patient. So if the patient is conscious, you can ask the patient to tell his or her name, his or her full name and age. And if she knows her blood group previously, ask, just check whether it is the correct blood group that is in your hand. Always you have to go to the patient with the blood pack and ask all the details from the patient and verify whether you are giving the correct blood pack to the patient. So there are several records that you all have to match. So those are BHT compatibility report, and make sure that both the ward doctor and the nurse, 2 persons, should testify that this pack is should be given to this patient. That means both of you should assure that this patient is getting the correct transfusion. So how both of you can do this? You have to check the compatibility report and the blood pack and the compatibility label attached to the blood pack and the BHT of the patient. The name, BHT number, age, and the blood group should be equal in all 4 documents. Make sure that you have to check all 4 documents before you giving it to the patient. So simply because these all 4 documents are telling, you can't just give the transfusion to the patient. You have to go to the patient bedside and ask the patient, what is your name, what is your full name, what is your age, what is your blood group. At least those 3 things you have to ask before giving the transfusion. So there is some recording should be done in the BHT before you give the transfusion. I have mentioned the 2 seals here which are being given by the blood bank. So you have to record the transfusion in such a way that you have to assure that you are giving the correct product to the correct patient. So if there is any discrepancy in the blood pack and the compatibility report and the compatibility label, please do not transfuse that pack. Before giving the blood transfusion, even if all the clerical check in the VHT, blood pack and the blue chit, everything is correct, you can't transfuse the pack. You have to check for the expiry date of the pack. You have to inspect for leaks, hemolysis, unusual discoloration, turbidity, clots of the pack. This is in order to prevent any bacterial contamination, which will lead to death if we transfuse that pack. So it is your responsibility to prevent such transfusion reaction. So if there are leaks, if there is discoloration, if there is clumping, please do not transfuse that pack. Please return it to the blood bank. It is how do we monitor the patient during and before the transfusion? You have to monitor the patient very carefully during the first 15 minutes of transfusion. It is the recommended practice, right? So during the first 15 minutes, you can run approximately 1 to 2 ml per minute, that is 24 drops in first 15 minutes. If there is no reaction to the patient after first 15 minutes, you can run the blood bag a little bit faster, but make sure that no medicines or no infusions, no solutions should be added to the line where blood is given. You all know that we issue a transfusion set with the blood bag. That is because we want to filter all the cellular debris, clots, or any undesirable particles going into the patient's circulation. This transfusion set has a filter with 170 microns. And one other thing I just want to emphasize is please do not use these transfusion sets more than 1 hour. Don't use it for more than 2 units of blood, even if the patient is bleeding to death. And if you want to start a platelet transfusion after a blood transfusion, for the platelet transfusion, you have to use a new transfusion set. So therefore, even when you have to be very careful when there is massive transfusion in the theater or in the emergency treatment unit. You all are in a hurry, and you all will try to save the life of the patient, but you all simply may forget to change the transfusion set. If you all are giving red other units, other components like platelets or FFP or any other thing after red cell, please change the transfusion set. And I just want to remind something regarding storage of blood in clinical areas. Because of the risk of hemolysis and because of the risk of bacterial contamination, please don't keep the issued units of blood and blood components in the nurse's station. When you receive, just after receiving it, transfuse it. And do not keep them in the domestic refrigerators available in the wards, because the blood bank refrigerators are made in such a way they keep 2 to 6 degrees temperature always, and it gives a alarm when they are not in the relevant range. Therefore, those are very expensive refrigerators. One cost about 5 to 6 million. uh, Therefore, don't keep blood in the routine normal domestic refrigerators in your wards. And blood products have to be transfused within the correct time limits. The good bedside transfusion practice should ensure where the patient needs when patient needs special blood like filtration, pooling, or warming blood, that has to be done. And you all should ensure final identity check at the bedside of the patient. Recording the transfusion is a must. Monitoring the transfused patient is a must. And investigating a transfusion reaction is a must. Some patients have to be given warm blood. That means the blood that is taken from the refrigerator is between 2 to 6 degrees temperature. For some patients, we can't give such blood straight away to the patients. Um, uh, Examples are adult patient receiving multiple transfusions and rapid transfusions, in exchange transfusions in infants, children who are receiving blood more than 15 ml per kg per hour, and patients with cold agglutinin disease. They should not be given cold blood. And we have to use a blood former uh, for those patients. If a patient is receiving rapid transfusion through a central line, that blood has to be warm. And there are designed blood warmers available in the theaters and in the hospitals. Get use of them. When red cell transfusions are concerned, you have to start the transfusion within 30 minutes of removing from the blood bank refrigerator. The time removed is written in the BHT, and you have to complete within 4 hours. So if you all need you all don't use that blood we have issued from the blood bank, please return it within 30 minutes. If you return it after 30 minutes, we have to discard that blood bag. It is a utter waste of government money. I told you what are the costs involved with blood transfusion. Please don't waste this scarce resource. Even the government spends so much money for this. It is a gift from a blood donor who gives blood without expecting anything. His only desire is to cure a patient. Therefore, please don't waste this scarce resource. When you all receive platelets and plasma components like FFP cryo, you all have to start this transfusion immediately then and there. Don't keep them in the nurse's station or patient's bedside. Start the transfusion, and you have to complete the transfusion within 30 minutes, because there is a risk of bacterial proliferation, loss of function, especially platelets will get clumped when we remove them from the agitation. Platelets are kept in an agitator in the blood bank, and when we remove them from agitator, the platelets start getting clumped. So you will not be giving platelets to the patient. If you delay the transfusion, you will just be giving plasma. The clotted platelet will get trapped in the filter in the transfusion set, and you will not get the required increment of platelet count from the patient, right? So how do you all monitor when a transfusion is started in a patient? So you all have to mark all the parameters like blood pressure, heart rate in a chart before the transfusion every 15 minutes for the first half an hour, that is 2 times in the first half an hour, then hourly until the transfusion is completed, and on completion of transfusion, and 1 hour after the completion of the transfusion, because some patients may complain of some undesirable effects even 1 hour after the transfusion. So when you want to give a transfusion, if a patient is in the corner of a ward, please get him down to the examination bed or a bed near the nurse's station. That is the best way. And please avoid nighttime transfusions as much as possible, because the supervision is minimal during nighttime. When you all are monitoring the patient who is being given a transfusion, you have to monitor the patient's general appearance, temperature, blood pressure, pulse, and respiratory rates. Also, if patient develops any reaction, you all have to monitor the fluid balance, because we want to see whether patient is going into acute renal failure. If any ABO incompatibility develops, you have to maintain the urine output 1 ml per kilogram body weight per hour. If it is not there, it means that patient is going into acute renal failure. So transfer the patient to a station where acute renal failure can be managed, where dialysis facilities are available. Few undesirable practices that I have observed is, in some theaters, they warm blood by putting in hot water. Please don't do this. This will lead to hemolysis. In accident service some years ago, this has done, and patient was dead on the theater table, because they warmed the blood, putting hot water, the red cells got hemolyzed, and they have transfused hemolyzed blood. The patient died then and there. And don't delay in the transfusion when issuing from the blood bank. When you are ready to transfuse, only get down the relevant blood bags from the patient. If you are going to have your lunch, don't send somebody to blood bank to get down blood bags. So complete everything and be ready with the transfusion and start the transfusion. Don't use domestic refrigerators. Don't give any pre-transfusion medication to the patient. I observe in some hospital, I'm not going to mention the hospital, the patients have been given hydrocortisone. All the patients have been given hydrocortisone immediately before the transfusion. So what happens was there were two mothers in the labor room, and one mother developed hemorrhage, antepartum hemorrhage. They wanted to transfuse. They got down the pack. It is a wrong pack. The pack has been given to the patient, maternal patient, in the labor room, and the patient didn't develop any transfusion reaction, but the HO has given the wrong pack. The reason why, they have given hydrocortisone before the transfusion. So we didn't get any information regarding the incompatible transfusion. Second transfusion also given. Then only the MO blood bank has detected the wrong blood has been given. By the time the patient has had hemoglobinuria, patient had gone into acute renal failure, and we have to transfer that maternal patient to the Castle Street Hospital, and patient has been dialyzed over weeks. Still, we don't know she has gone into chronic renal failure. She recovered from acute renal failure because of the intervention of the clinicians involved. If we didn't get involved, there would have been a maternal death. Please don't practice that simply because your seniors tell you to give hydrocortisone before transfusion. Never, never, never give hydrocortisone before transfusion. And no medicines, no medication should be added to the blood bank. I just want to enlighten you all regarding the therapeutic procedures done at the blood bank, especially the plasma exchanges and therapeutic platelet reduction. We do therapeutic thrombocytopheresis for patients. We have done in Castle Street Hospital. We have started doing, and we can provide those procedures. Therapeutic granulocytopheresis is done for patients who are awaiting chemotherapy with high white cell counts. Always we do those things, and we provide PRP for orthopedic, dermatological, plastic surgery, and ENT procedures. We provide therapeutic stem cell preparations for all those procedures. Venous sections in hyperviscosity patients also being done by the transfusion consultants. And we get a lot of therapeutic plasma exchange procedure requests, and you have to follow the algorithm that we have given. I'm not going to elaborate more on this. The relevant things we request you all to do from the blood bank has to be completed in order to start a therapeutic plasma exchange procedure. In National Blood Transfusion Service, we provide you all with several special blood components, like irradiated blood components, the blood components that has to be irradiated. I think you all should have an idea. All Buffy code transfusions should be irradiated. All cellular blood products, red cells and platelets, should be irradiated for some disease conditions, like if a patient has been given ATG, that is aplastic anemia, patients who have been given ATG, all patients, all blood products have to be irradiated. Patients who have undergone stem cell transplantation procedures, until engraftment, all the products have to be irradiated, whether it is platelets or red cells. It's all cellular products. And if a transfusion is given from a relative, we have to irradiate that pack. So that is why I ask you all to write the diagnosis in the request form. And we provide plasma-reduced platelets for dengue patients and several other patients who have developed transfusion reactions to platelets and refractory to platelets. So if you need plasma-reduced platelets, we can provide them. We do prepare apheresis platelets and HLA matched platelets for those patients who need such products, like patients who have developed platelet refractoriness. That means if we are not getting required platelet increment after transfusions, we do HLA match platelet for patients and we give them. We can provide leukoreduced platelets, leukodepleted platelets, especially who are patients who are awaiting transplants. We can provide them in order to reduce HLA sensitization, HLA antibody formation. We have these special blood products. All patients can get those blood products. Other services available with the National Blood Center, we have a immunohematology reference laboratory, and all the antibody formations in the patients are sorted out in this lab. It is the only lab for the entire country. And we do resolution of blood groupings and selection of antigen negative blood, so and so. All the specific immunohematological investigations are done at National Blood Center, Nara Hempita. And the HLA lab at National Blood Center performs HLA antigen testing as well as HLA typing testing and HLA antibody testing and cross-match testing for all transplantations, whether it is a renal transplant, whether it is a stem cell transplant. We are equipped with high technology. It is a ISO 15189 accredited laboratory. It is the National Blood Transfusion Service only. The government sector, it is the only government sector laboratory which has ISO accreditation in Sri Lanka. I don't want to elaborate much on these things. If you all want any information, just call me, because it's taking time. Usually for HLA typing, it takes 3 to 5 days, but because we are doing samples with lots that we are getting, it takes some time more than this. We do compatibility testing, HLA cross-match testing for all renal transplants. And we do PRA, that is panel reactive antibody testing, before transplant and after transplant for all the renal transplant patients. In Sri Lanka, almost more than 50% of the blood banks are computerized. We have our own system called BBMS, developed by our own blood bank medical officer, and all the blood bank equipments have been developed, given to all the blood banks, all the laptops, barcode readers, and we have a server. We need some infrastructure facilities for some few blood banks. We will get in a few months' time. Then the entire blood bank system will be computerized. At the moment, more than 50 to 60% are computerized. We are issuing a computer-generated report, that is the compatibility report, to all the patients now from all the blood banks. And we have frozen red cell facilities. We can keep rare red cells for more than 10 years by frozen red cell facility. We do this at the moment for Bombay O blood type. And stem cells transplantation has been started in 2016 in National Cancer Institute, Maharagama, and still continuing. And we are developing further. We have guidelines for nurses and doctors. You all can refer them whenever you all want. The summary of my presentation is this: positive patient identification is a must. That is the rule to prevent ABO incompatible transfusion. If you suspect a transfusion reaction, stop the transfusion, inform the blood bank, and report. If you have any doubts, please talk to the blood bank staff. Are there any questions? I'm ready to answer all your questions. Please unmute your mic and ask me any question.
Madam, good morning, madam.
Yeah, good morning.
Madam, this is regarding when we are transfusing, some doctors are using the pressure cuff for the quick transfusion. Is it acceptable?
I didn't hear your question. What are the things that doctors are using?
Pressure cuff for the quick transfusion.
Pressurizing the blood pack. Actually,
Yes.
the squeeze in the blood pack through this transfusion set can harm the red cells. One thing, because it has 170 microns. It is a very small pore. So when you pressurize through that filter, sometimes red cells can get damaged. Therefore, I can't say not to do, but it is not not it is not a thing
Recommended.
to do, not recommended, because the patient sometimes will get hemolyzed blood if it
Okay,
is too much pressure. Yeah, if you apply
one more.
too much pressure,
Okay,
little
madam.
bit of
Thank you,
pressure
madam.
won't do that harm, right? Yeah.
One more question, madam. I have seen everywhere for anemic patients, more blood going. Usually, they are issuing the almost expiring blood for the anemic patients. So,
Yeah.
what is the point of transfusing?
In Canada, they did a study called ABLE study. Actually, they assess by the quality of red cells throughout the aging process of the red cell unit. So they concluded that there is no harm to the red cells until the end of the expiry date of the blood. So there is no harm giving blood towards the expiry date to anemic patients, because these blood anyway will survive in the circulation closer to 120 days. So that other than this ABLE study is the largest study that has been conducted for this purpose. Other studies which have been done then and there in few centers also concluded that there is no harm, and aging of blood is not that a thing that has that to be considered. So you can give blood close to expiry date to anemic patients. And you all can also observe that the expected increment in the patient, you all get that expected increment. And we have done studies that also conclude that when we give close to expiry date blood, we monitored whether the patient gets the expected increment, they got it. So what are your observations? Have you observed those things?
I have done during my internship. We have transferred 3 pints, but HB was same even after. So you are expiring tomorrow, madam. We have transferred consecutively 3 pints.
Okay.
The same day expired, but ultimately HB didn't pick up.
So did you try to transfuse new blood, fresh blood to those patients?
After that, I did this with the VAG and we transferred with 1 week.
Sometimes the patients who are bleeding, most of the time, Genenops was get patients who are bleeding acutely because they get dysfunctional uterine bleeding. So if you transfuse a patient with dysfunctional uterine bleeding, if it is a heavy uterine bleeding, you will not get the expected increment. That may be the reason behind that, because this ABLE study is the worldwide consultants who were looking for. So it concluded that aging does not do any harm.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you for your kind time.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much, madam, for that informative presentation. I think there were a lot of questions in the chat box, madam, but already you have explained everything. And I think the participants can go through again in our YouTube video, the madam's lectures again. Madam, one more question that participants have asked, like what to do if the patient is having fever just before transfusion? Should we abort transfusion or should we proceed after administering paracetamol?
Yeah, if you can delay the transfusion, if the hemoglobin level of the patient is 7, if the patient is not symptomatic, if patient is not actively bleeding, we can delay the transfusion until fever subsides. That is the best method to do. But if the patient requires the transfusion very urgently, if the patient is bleeding, and we have to optimize the hemoglobin level in order to maintain the oxygen carrying capacity, of course you have to give the transfusion, and you can administer paracetamol at the same time.
Thank you very much, madam, for that clear explanation. I think we are running out of time, and that's all the queries for madam. If there are no more queries, I would like to thank Dr. Pavitra Arivatta for her excellent presentation on behalf of the GMOA and the Society for Health Research and Innovation. Also, we would like to present her a token of appreciation on behalf of GMOA and the Society for Health Research and Innovation. That's the end of the webinar today. Thank you all for your participation, and I'm Dr. Sinta signing off from here. Have a good day.